and welcome to Game Changer. I'm Maryam Zia. Tonight we will be taking a look at President Donald Trump's new tariff that have, of course, we know have shaken the global trade. President Donald Trump has imposed new tariffs of around 25% of goods from Canada and Mexico and 10% tariff from products from China. And we know that Canada and Mexico have responded quickly with their own tariffs, and China has also hit back. In today's program, we'll be talking about this trade war. And when we look at global markets, they have reacted with shock, and the uncertainty can be observed across Asia as well as in Europe. But for Pakistan, this trade war presents both opportunities as well as challenges. In today's program, we'll be taking a look at how this protectionist agenda of Trump is going to be impacting the global economy in the coming days and in coming years for that matter, and what needs to be done on Pakistan's part to leverage this trade war. To discuss this and more, we are joined online by former Ambassador Dr. JAMIL Khan. Welcome to the program. We're also joined by a research fellow from Charhar Institute, Mr. CHENG XIZHONG. Welcome to the program. Dr. Jamil, let me start with you. When we look at this policy of America First by President Donald Trump, of course, he promised in his campaign that he will be imposing these tariffs. How do you see the rationale behind this policy and the way Canada, Mexico, and China have reacted?
Well, the trauma witness already what you have mentioned in your intro, and that trauma is in the stock exchange. Now, initially, because without any preparation, and if you start shaking the entire world, supply chain system, the tariff system, and the entire world trade, then once you start shaking it, it would take quite some time to stabilize. And that shakeup can result into a recession. And that's what the economists and the diplomats are quite worried about. Now, if we see the history books, 1789, US had done the same thing. You know, they had levied tariff, and that took them quite some time to stabilize at that time. 1816, same thing happened. And in 1930, it led them to recession, a Great Depression. So this time also the world should be prepared until it is stabilized. In fact, this protectionism of the economy does not really work as much in this multipolar world. In fact, the US is not mentally prepared. The US still is under that euphoria that perhaps they are still in the living in the unipolar world, and they have continued to be in a status like empire for 50 years. Now their decline started, and they're not mentally prepared. So therefore, all these very abrupt decisions, which is shaking the world market. Now, who is going to be the worst affected? In your intro, you mentioned about Pakistan. I'm coming on that. But the worst affected people are the US, those people who are living paycheck to paycheck. Now, they
Right.
would be impacted. What is going to
Right,
happen to them?
U.S. consumers are going to be affected, but we also know that Trump has a rationale behind it, and he has declared a national emergency. So with these tariffs remaining in place until the declared emergency is resolved, we don't see any clear criteria, Dr. Jamil. So how do you foresee this prolonged uncertainty impacting the global supply chains?
That is disrupting. That's what I was mentioning. The global supply chain is going to get disrupted. Now, China, the tariff, 10% tariff on China, China is responding on it. And then they are going to have a tariff on the coal and on the agricultural products and some other products of the service sector of the United States. Even the European Union has also already said that they are going to also retaliate. Canada, Mexico, for now, they have suspended that, but they have already declared that what they're going to do. But then see the impact, what has happened on Wall Street of all these announcements which Trump has made. So initially, it would definitely shake up the world trade, and it would definitely shake up the world economy. As I was mentioning, in 1930, it had taken us to the Great Depression. And is the world prepared for it? Now, China continues to be an economy with about $8.6 trillion economy, and China continues to be the biggest manufacturer and the biggest trader in the world. And they have the surplus. They can sustain that, although there would be a shock, but they can sustain that. And they have their agreement with about 150 countries of the world in Africa and Eastern Europe and Asia. So they already have through BRI their agreements and their network. So they would definitely immediately start drifting and shifting towards alternate market.
Right, of
But
course,
what should I say?
diversification of the trade between China and other countries will be coming back to it. And let me bring in Mr. Sheng into the discussion. Mr. Sheng, when we look at this, of course, tariffs policy of Trump, China has imposed its own counter tariffs on US on a different variety of products. How do you, and even China is also considering to taking this matter to WTO. What's your take on this, firstly? And secondly, don't you think that this is going to be, this tit for tat policy is going to be making global economy further uncertain in these uncertain times when there are a lot of conflicts around the world?
I think this is not only trade war; it's a kind of revolution. Trump is announcing new things almost every day, and now America itself is in great turmoil. So Trump's recent tariff policies, I think, will have multiple impacts on the global economy. So far as America is concerned, I think America will be affected most. So impact on the U.S. economy itself, for example, consumer market. Imposing additional tariffs will lead to an increase in the prices of imported goods and a decrease in consumer willingness to purchase. So there will be less purchase and also affect the role of consumption in driving the American economy. So far as industrial development is concerned, although the purpose is to protect domestic industries, countermeasures taken by other countries may have impact on the U.S. Export industries. So far as so far as job market is concerned, some companies may shrink the business and reduce employment opportunities due to rising costs and market constraints. So far as the financial market is concerned, the uncertainty of tariff policies will undermine investor confidence. And the impact on the global economic landscape, I think about the trade order, Trump's tariff policy is a typical form of trade protectionism, which undermines the rules based on multilateral trading system, impacts the stability of global industrial and supply chains, and poses
And
greater uncertainty
of course,
to the global trade order.
right. And Mr. Sheng, when we look at different economists, one of the economists, Mr. Paul Krugman, described Trump's tariffs as a really destructive and akin to throwing sand in the gears of international commerce. How do you interpret this criticism, and what long-term economic damage might these policies inflict on the global markets? And how do you think this is going to be shaping the international trade or global economic landscape?
I think mainly the changing policies of America, it will seriously affect the economic growth, or we may say recovery. And global trade protectionism is on the rise, leading to a decrease in production efficiency and a rising cost for business, suppressing global economic growth and making it more difficult for many countries to recover the economy, casting a shadow over the world economic outlook. And so far as investment environment is concerned, policy uncertainty. Why I call it policy uncertainty? Because Trump changes his policies almost every minute. So policy uncertainty makes companies more cautious about the future investment decisions, reduces cross-border investment and industrial layout, and
Right,
affects
right.
the efficiency of global resources allocation and the long-term growth momentum of the economy. Thank you.
Right, of course, there is a lot of uncertainty and there are a lot of concerns. But to talk more about it, we are now joined by another economist, Mr. Mohammad Najib. Welcome to the program. Mr. Najib, there are a lot of concerns, but when we look at these new tariffs, how do you see its impact on economies like Pakistan? Because according to different reports, with a country like Pakistan, which has an import-driven economy, do you think it can benefit from global commodity prices that are lowering?
Well, you see, what we need to understand, if you're talking particularly in context of the tariffs that have been increased by the U.S. government recently, then in that case, I think that is not going to affect us as much as some of the other economies. The reason being that we form a very small share of the U.S. trades in terms of
Exactly.
what we export to them, in terms of
Less than
also what
1%.
we
Yeah.
import from them, right? And the products that we are exporting to the U.S., primarily textile products, they are already faced with 15% of tariff, so that's already considerably high. So we are not facing any new, you could say, tariff increase. However, when you talk about how global prices have been, we have seen a downward trend in that. I think that is also being already reflected in Pakistan's decreasing inflation numbers. But then again, this is a business cycle that goes on in the world, and I think we should be wary of the fact that if these prices are coming down globally, then eventually in some business cycles later on, these might go on to increase, especially also with how different tariff structures are increasing in the U.S. For you could say for even the raw materials that they're importing, let's say from Canada, Mexico, and other North American or South American countries for products that are being made in the U.S. So I think that is something that eh, going on might reverse this global price level trend. And that would be something that would be a major cause of concern for countries like Pakistan and other developing economies.
Right. Right, but Mr. Najib, at the same time, we know that US is Pakistan's largest export market, with exports reaching around $5 billion in 2023, and it represents 17% of our exports. Do you think this is going to be significant in context of Pakistan, and we can leverage it somehow?
Could you please repeat the last sentence? I didn't get that. Sorry.
Right. When we talk about these tariffs imposed on major trading partners
Right.
or big economies of the world, but do you think that economies like Pakistan can benefit from it? Because we know that US remains one of the largest export markets for Pakistan.
Right. So basically, see, when we're talking about Pakistan's export, now in terms of Pakistan, yes, those exports are very large. But when we see in terms of the United States, they form a very, you could say, small part of their trade volume altogether, right? And we are already facing those high tariffs already. So there no new tariffs have been imposed on products coming from Pakistan. So I think that would not be an impact on this. However, yes, there is an opportunity in terms of the tariffs that USA has imposed on countries other than Pakistan. Let's say China is one major trading partner of Pakistan, who would now be looking for either reducing their prices that they're sending goods to the US, or maybe they would be trying to find new markets for the product that they're sending. And in that, yes, Pakistan does have an opportunity to increase trade ties with
So
not
it
just
does give
China.
Pakistan a competitive edge, right?
Right? Could you please repeat?
So it does give Pakistan a competitive edge.
Yes, it could, but again, it also depends on how we leverage that, because we can see how, given the energy prices have been rising, how the labor cost is rising. So Pakistan's own cost of production is has been on a higher trend. So in that, we are already quite uncompetitive in the global market right now. But yes, this price angle might
And
give us a little
how do
edge.
you propose Pakistan can leverage that, and in what sectors, in what industries specifically?
So I think Pakistan has very little industrial base right now, which it can use to target the global markets. One is textile, the other is the surgical equipment. I think rather than just focusing on the U.S. market, we need to focus more on how we can improve overall you could say the competitiveness of the industry for globally, so that it becomes desirable and desirable even if these tariffs are there or not. One of the major, you could say, procedures for that could be reducing the regulatory costs, regulatory compliance costs that Pakistan faces, something that we term as the regulatory sludge, because that also tends to increase a lot of, you could say, investment costs and cost of doing business in Pakistan. So once those things start easing up, the other things will eventually follow as well. So I think rather than just focusing on just a single market, we need to focus on the overall industrial structure of our economy, and once that improves, then we will be able to leverage this situation.
Right, of course, of course. Dr. Jamil, when we look at these tariffs that are being imposed by President Donald Trump, of course, he has also threatened tariffs to be imposed on EU imports and plans to announce reciprocal tariffs on more countries. How might these broader threats influence the global trade markets and, of course, affect Pakistan's strategies and strategic partnership or trade relations with these countries?
Pakistan should find the way to really capitalize on it, and Pakistan should really find ways and means to reduce its production cost and to fill some of these gaps. For example, the dollar shops, as we all are aware, in the United States and Canada and North American countries, particularly United States, there are more than 38,000 dollar shops there in United States, and that is at about more than 20,000 locations in the United States. And some of us, or most of us, who have seen those dollar stores, you'll find the Chinese products there. Now, China would definitely, like they did it in past, they diversified it to Vietnam, to Bangladesh, to India, and Pakistan, because of, I would say, our own slow pace. Now, with SIFC, perhaps we'll gain the momentum and pace. Because of our own slow pace, that diversification could not come to Pakistan, although we have a flagship project of the BRI. Now I'm hoping that those special economic zones, some of which are almost finished now, could be quickly commissioned, quickly established, and some of the joint ventures, as it has happened in Vietnam and
Right, right,
Bangladesh, by other.
right. Right, Dr. Jamil, you mentioned about BRI and CPAC, but at the same time, we know that US has open reservations about this project. Don't you think that would be making Pakistan more vulnerable in terms of economic ties or trade partnerships with US moving forward?
Well, two parts here. Part number one, the international laws, the United Nations Charter. We have our sovereign right to have our relations with any country we like to. And China, being our best of the best friends, the United States theoretically should not have any objection to it, so long as we do not really hurt the interest of United States. But what can we do if United States presume that since we have the closer proximity and geographical proximity with China, and since we have this CPAC, which is the flagship project of BRI, 150 countries already have signed that agreement. China has spent $1 trillion already on this. See, so this project has to take off, and that's why now the economists say that the world economy is moving from the global west to global south. So that's what it is. Now, I initially, in my previous segment, I was mentioning that United States basically is still under that euphoria of being the emperor for last 50 years. The decline, they are not being able to sustain that. They're not being able to really face that reality. So till the time they face. Now, in the process of this transition of facing the reality that we have a multipolar world now, and China is emerging and taking a lead in SCO in terms of trade and many other aspects, unless the world is able to accept. 150 countries have already accepted United States because they've been assuming themselves, and they were for 50 years only unipolar emperor of the world. But now the reality is changing. From that standpoint, yes, we'll have a resistance. From that standpoint, we would have a pressure from the United States because United States foreign policy number one priority is containment of China. See what's happening in South China Sea. See what's happening in Indian Ocean. See what is AUKUS. See what is Quad, and how the United States and its allies are the, taking position against the Chinese growth and China containment. My only fear is that if it's done unfair means,
Right.
that China has to come up with its own might. That China, Russia, and SCO countries now they are the countries and they are the powers to reckon with. It is going to take some transition. Pakistan is going to come under some pressure already, but we have hopes that our policymakers would make the best use of this opportunity of trade war or whatever, and we should start filling up the gap. And I'm sure Chinese business people, if they are provided the required facilities, which CIFC has committed and our
Right,
leadership
right,
has
of course,
committed,
of
then
course. Those opportunities remain an important factor. And Mr. Shang, coming back to you, Dr. Saab mentioned about the multipolar world and economy now being shifted from the global north to global south. And when we reflect on the past, we know that 2018 tariffs sparked prolonged US-China trade tensions. How do you see the current round of tariffs? Do you think this is the continuation of past policies? And if so, what lessons can be learned?
I think this Trump's trade war will affect the world for some time. But for the world economy and also economies of different countries, there are both positive impact and also negative impact. So far, just now we talked about impact on Pakistan. And for Pakistan, I think there are some positive impact. For example, the imposition of tariffs by the United States may lead to a decline in global commodity prices, especially for commodities such as oil. And Pakistan is an import-driven economy. With the strong US dollars and high interest rates, it can import key goods at lower prices, which is beneficial for reducing its overall import costs. Another is the decrease in commodity prices can enable Pakistan to obtain production materials at lower costs and enhance its competitiveness in export industries such as textiles and technology, and have a price advantage in international market. So these are some points quite positive. Of course, there are also negative impact on different countries, including Pakistan. And so far as the Belt Road and the CPEC are concerned, Belt and Road Initiative and the CPEC project have provided Pakistan and other countries stable trade and economic cooperation channels, reduced its independence, reduced its dependence on the single market, such as the United States market, and reduce the external risks brought by the trade war. And infrastructure, the CPEC project has promoted construction of transportation, energy, communication, and other infrastructure in Pakistan, elevated infrastructure bottlenecks, and laid the foundation for Pakistan to attract more investment and enhance trade competitiveness in the textile of the trade in the context of trade war. And promoting regional economic cooperation, also strengthening Pakistan's economic ties with China and other countries along the Belt and Road, promoting regional integration, enabling Pakistan to better integrate it into regional economic development, seek more trade and cooperation opportunities in the region, and resist in the impact of trade war. And also, there are some negative impact I will mention later. Thank you.
Right, right. We will be talking about those challenges as well. But coming back to you, Mr. Najib, Mr. Sheng alluded to, that economies like Pakistan can benefit from these higher tariffs, and they may lower inflation in Pakistan. But different analysts and different reports suggest and estimate that Trump's tariffs could drive global inflation higher, potentially raising the annual rate from 2.9% to 4%. What measures should Pakistan and emerging economies like Pakistan need to take or need to adopt to mitigate these impacts?
In order to understand how it is going to impact Pakistan, we need to see what are the products that have been imposed tariff on, and how many of those are which are being used in production of further goods in the United States, and then how many of those goods are is Pakistan importing, right? So in terms of that, I think the impact on Pakistan directly in terms of that would be less. Secondly, in terms of global inflation, yes, the products that US is importing, raw materials that it is importing from Canada, from China, from Mexico, and other countries, which it is be using for producing goods that it is exporting to the global markets, that is going to have a positive effect, or by positive I mean it is going to increase the global inflation certainly, but it is something that is going to be seen over time and as to how that happens, right? But yes, as we saw during Donald Trump's first tenure as well, the trade war kept on intensifying, particularly also when China responded aggressively at that time. So that is something that China is holding back on right now. It is also to be seen how China responds in the long run to this, and that is going to have certain impacts on the inflation as well. I don't see how it might help lower inflation in Pakistan, but yes, in terms of global inflation, it is certainly going to cause an increase in that.
Maybe Pakistan needs to diversify its trade partners so that our dependency on US is lesser. Thank you very much, Mr. Mohammad SHAAF Najib, for joining us in today's program. Coming back to you, Dr. Jamil, when we talk about Trump's America First trade policy, it involves not only tariffs, but like we earlier discussed, it also threatens EU. How do you think these actions are going to be impacting relations between US and EU, and what are your expectations that this bloc is going to be doing if Trump goes ahead with those tariffs?
In fact, China has an opportunity. Russia, China, and this bloc has an opportunity because the way Trump is treating EU, its own allies, and the way Trump is treating NATO, reducing its funding and criticizing NATO, the way Trump has planned the tariff on EU has already announced that they are going to retaliate on it in terms of levying tariff on the service sector and all of the material what they are importing from the United States. So that is kind of a tit for tat action would start. And once it starts, it is quite natural and it's automatically affect the trade relations, impacts the diplomatic relations. And diplomatic relations, they conversely affect the trade relations. So if the trade relation is sore, the diplomatic relations also get impacted and affected. And we understand that the European Union countries, 27 countries, they are so netted with the financial system of the United States, in fact, the entire world, but more importantly, the EU, that they would also find it hard to really go into that competition. But then this is a kind of a action like Canada and the US, like the North American countries, Mexico and US. These are the time where they are entering into a phase of a mutual destruction. And what does it mean? That the people, the population of both sides would initially have the impact of it. I know even China, although to my assessment, they were mentally prepared for it, but then the total stabilization period, it will take some time for China also to stabilize. So China, I'm sure, is looking for the diversification, looking for, but then China has the depth in the economy to sustain that. The European Union do not have the depth in their economy to sustain that much. So your initial question and the response to that question is that it's going to really impact and affect the diplomatic relations, which has been quite strong in terms of the Western countries led by the United States. But this time, I think it's going to definitely have its impact. And the time there's a course
Right,
correction.
but at the same time, Dr. Jamil, we know that these tariffs were supposed to be effective from February the 4th. But Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau secured a 30-day pause on tariffs by committing to a $1.3 billion border enforcement plan. Do you think this is a diplomatic win, and other countries can go for such negotiations moving forward?
That's the demonstration of Trump administration of showing the supremacy over the other neighboring
Pressuring the
countries. In
nations, right?
fact, the other nations, bullying other nations. For example, he now is claiming, the Trump administration and Trump is claiming that, look, they have to deploy about 10,000 troops, the Mexican, the Canadians, now they have to control the border. They have to control the border in terms of drugs. I don't know how much drugs. Canadians were quite good at it. Mexico had a little problem, but then he has been able to display to itself, to demonstrate to its voters and supporters. We must remember that Trump this time has come with a lot of support of its own population. So he has to cater for his own population. He has to cater for his own voter and supporter. Despite the fact that the world knows that how he has been able to muster that much of support by polarizing the society, but fine enough. It's their own country. They have the right to polarize the society or whatever they do. But Trump now is a popular leader in that segment of its society. So he has demonstrated to its own people that, look, we are superior. We have the supremacy. and Canada is now towing our line. They are behaving now. The Mexico is also behaving. So let's suspend it for 30 days and maybe instead of more tariff, a little less. So this is known as the Trump trade, not only war, but the Trump trade tricks also. So he wants to, that he wants to prove himself to be the most powerful, and B, that he wants to have better strength in the negotiations and should be able, like, look, what he's saying about Gaza, what he's saying about Middle East, what he's saying about Greenland, what he's saying about Ukraine. So all
Panama,
these
yeah.
things, if he, and Panama, he has changed the name already. And while day before yesterday he was flying, he was very proudly telling it to his journalist in the plane that, look, I'm flying over not Panama Canal, but the US Canal, American Canal. So, yes, those are the pride of the nation. He's trying to give the pride to the Americans, which he has the right to do that. But at the same time, your original question that to what effect, to what extent it's going to impact the soft image of United States. The United States thrived during all these 50 years with a soft image. Now that is being replaced with China. China through its Belt and Road initiative, China through its soft trade policy, China through its soft diplomatic policy is now having a network of 150. It's not a joke. It's like a United Nations members, 193 in United Nations, and China now has 150 members who have signed agreement for BRI. That means
Right.
they agree the trade policy of China. So that is not being, tolerated. That's not being digested by the empire, which had really thought that the unipolar world belongs to them for 50 years. Now it's drifting and shifting. So that's why you
Right, Dr.
see
Jamil, in
all
the
the
long term, we have to see the long term impacts of these policies on the US, not only the US, but the global market and, of course, US soft power in different countries of the world. But Mr. Cheng, when we look at these different reports, some of the reports suggest a slowdown of Chinese economy due to this trade war. What's your take on this? And also, how do you think this is going to be impacting Pakistan's export base, and what strategies can Pakistan opt for to diversify its export base when we talk about all this in the context of BRI or CPEC initiatives?
Yeah, during the first tenure of Trump, and also during the time of Biden administration, at that time, the American trade war, the main counterparts was China, and also they had serious sanctions against Russia. Now the war, I think, has expanded to the whole world. The American trade war has they've launched a trade war against almost everybody, including EU and Australia, New Zealand, and all the countries in the world. So, but under this situation, now I think China feels a little in a little better position because it also makes the world united, to deal with the American trade war. And China itself is a big market. We have so many, trade partners, good partners like ASEAN countries, like Pakistan and African countries. So I don't think the Chinese economy will be much affected under the present situation. And I feel finally the American trade war against almost everybody, the most affected will be America itself. So Trump, I think, because he changes, maybe someday he will change the policy and he will stop the trade war. Maybe, also the expansion, American hegemonism, they have openness that they have a territorial expansion. Like the ambassador has mentioned so many places, including Green Island. and also Canada as a state of America. So this is territorial expansion, and Trump has openly said that. Maybe in South Asia, they will say, oh, this part will be American. So this is terrible. Thank you.
Hearing
Right. But yeah, Dr. Jamil, please go ahead.
Yeah, I said I was making some just remark on in continuation of Mr. Cheng that United States is doing all that but just by tearing apart the United Nations Charter, which is an international law. I know the sovereign country being made as 51st state, Greenland being included, Gaza being owned, and all these things. This is against the international law. So that means there is no United Nations now in the eyes of the Trump administration and Trump. So if there is no United Nations, then this world is going to be like a law of jungle. So there won't be any world order. Then people would start getting into conflict, into war. So it was only United Nations which has been able to its greater extent because of the veto power. We've been facing a lot of difficulties in getting the resolution implemented and passed, like, for example, Gaza, for example, Kashmir, for example, so many other part of the world, Iraq war, Afghanistan. So if there was no veto of the United States, the world would have been in a much better situation and shape today. But anyways, that's besides the point. But the fact of the matter is that if there is no respect to the law, whether it's a country law or whether it's an international law, then there is a law of jungle. The powerful would
Right,
have
and
all the
there
all
is
the
going to be chaos that we are witnessing at this point in time, and the certainty not only on the geopolitical level but in economic level as well. But lastly, very briefly, Dr. Jamil, we know that US is leveraging tariffs as a tool to force concession, and like you earlier mentioned that this is economic bullying. How do you think that Pakistan should be doing in these shifting geopolitical and geoeconomic landscape?
No, our friends, or for that matter, other member states of the United Nations, they understand Pakistan's position. And Pakistan, of course, have to be a little more aggressive in its diplomacy in making the world community understand that we are under the debt. We have so much of burden of the debt, and that's why our foreign policy is being impacted. Any sovereign country, if you are under such a heavy debt, then you have to listen to the dictates of IMF. And you know who dominates IMF? United States. Who dominates World Bank? United States. Until the time BRICS is fully commissioned, until the time the other power, the global West, becomes so much of gain so much of a strength in terms of world financial market, Pakistan has to be very careful and has to steer through. United States has been our biggest destination of export. We have always been having a
Right.
surplus export with United States, not with China. China has really come for the rescue of Pakistan on so many occasions. But maybe our own policy makers have to pull their socks to see how best they can, see what the Vietnam has done. It had just about 8 years ago, $35 billion exports. Today, they have $350 billion dollars export because of the diversification of the China. So Pakistan has to really try and align its policy in a way that they are able to draw the same kind of benefits. This bloc is now the future of countries of this part of the world, including Pakistan. But this transition
Right.
is a very, very precarious transition. We have to be very, very careful. We have to take our friends along while we are taking decision. We are being pushed. We are being pushed now to take sides. We are trying to avoid it because we can't afford it at this point in time. Our policy is to have friendship with all the countries, and China has never objected to it. China has never asked us not to have a friendship with other countries. But at the same time, we would like to
Right.
see the national interest, whether it's China or United States or UK or any other country for that
The
matter.
balance of the
And
policy and sovereignty of the country, of course, comes first. On that note, we conclude our discussion. I thank both of our panelists for joining us in today's program. And all from Game Changer tonight. Take care. Allah Hafiz.